Hi everyone, welcome to Physical Geography, Geography 1 for Spring 2019. I am your professor, Jamie Rossiter. You are going to hear a lot of my voice this semester on lectures. You can talk to me through my office hours on Tuesdays from 3 to 4 p.m. on Google Hangouts. You do not need a Gmail address to use Google Hangouts. You can just go to hangouts.google.com and use any email address to log in. And if you can find me at jrossiter0, it's important to have the 0, at saddleback.edu. You can also make an appointment to talk to me that way, or you can email me, which is what most students choose to do. I will respond to your email fairly quickly. This short video is going to serve as an introduction to the syllabus. I encourage you to read the syllabus closely, use it as a guide for the rest of our short semester. This is an 8-week class. We move very, very quickly. So you're going to want to make sure that you understand and know what is due. So what are we going to talk about in this class? This course examines the major world patterns of the physical environment. The course covers the fundamental information and processes dealing with the Earth's atmosphere, climate, landforms, natural vegetation, water, and soils, along with appropriate use of maps and charts. So here's a map of global climate zones, and we're certainly going to look at a lot of maps over the course of the semester. But basically, we are going to spend a lot of time just kind of understanding how the world works, right? How the atmosphere works, what controls our climate, how landforms are created, why certain vegetation is in certain places. This is a very broad survey class. And again, we will move very quickly. We will cover sometimes 3 chapters a week due to the short nature of this class. So you really want to be sure that you're not going to fall behind. Your required text is McKnight's Physical Geography for 12th edition by Darrell Hess. The 11th edition is just fine and can save you quite a bit of money. Not a ton changed between the 11th and 12th. I'm fine with you using the 11th edition. Also, there's a California edition, which I believe is on the 4th. That is also okay. But generally speaking, the 12th has been around for a little while, so you should be able to find a decently priced one. But the 11th you can get for even less money, and I'm fine for you using that. If you were taking my regional geography class or cultural geography class, I would really stress that you have the current edition, but with this class, you can use a previous edition. Don't go any farther back than the 11th, though. You're going to want to make sure that you understand Canvas and how to use Canvas. This class obviously takes place entirely on Canvas. If you have problems submitting an assignment or knowing how to use Canvas, I am not the person to ask for that unless something is like totally unavailable to you. But generally speaking, there are resources for you at Saddleback. Their student IT is who you're going to want to contact if you have questions about Canvas in general. This class is divided into modules. Each week consists of 1 module. You are not allowed to work ahead. You have to work on the module that we are currently on. That's because as an online class, we're supposed to be completing this all together. Right now, you're into the introduction to the course where you have this video, which says start here. And then this week, you're going to do module 1. Modules become available on midnight on Sunday, and you have until midnight the following Sunday to complete it. There's one exception, that should say exception, not exceptions, and that is the last module is due on Wednesday, just because that's the last day of the semester. You get so you want to make sure that that one is completed on Wednesday. But any given module, it's going to tell you what's in the module. You're probably going to watch a video of the lecture. You're going to do some short exercises. And then at the end of every module is a quiz. So you're going to want to log in, open up your module, see what you have to do for that week, and go through it step by step. It's fairly straightforward. So the coursework for this class, how are you graded? You have quizzes. There are 8 quizzes worth 15 points each for a total of 120 points. Basically in this class, because it's so short, I just quiz at the end of every module rather than trying to do a couple of exams, because we just can't really build up to that. So once you complete that module, whatever's in that module can take place on that quiz. The quizzes are relatively short. They're a mixture of multiple choice and short answer. And they are timed. So if you receive extra time on quizzes, I can do that for you. You're going to want to make sure that you email me those accommodations. You're also going to have exercises. There's 18 exercises. So you'll have, most weeks you're going to have 2 of those at least. Those are worth 10 points each. I'm going to ask you to answer a discussion question, do a short exercise. So it's a huge portion of your grading. There's a final survey in this class where I ask you basically to evaluate the course, and I use that in order to kind of improve the course in the future. This is totally anonymous. I can just see that you did it, but I can't match the answers with somebody, so feel free to be honest. There's a plagiarism quiz in Module 1, which you're going to complete. You can take that quiz up to 3 times so that you can improve your score. It is very tempting to plagiarize in an online class. If you plagiarize in an online class, or in any class for that matter, you'll receive a 0 for the assignment. So do not plagiarize. Everything should be in your own words. If you use another source, sometimes I will ask you to include citations. I'll ask you to go do a bit of research on something. So you're going to want to make sure that everybody's very clear about what plagiarism is, and we're not going to do it. That's a total of 325 points. I used to have this class complete a weekly journal, which I just removed for this semester. So in lectures, because I recorded those for the previous semester, you might hear me mention the weekly journal. There's no weekly journal in this class. But I encourage you to be in contact with me if you have questions, if you feel like you're falling behind, if something is confusing to you. I am just as accessible to you in this class as I would be in an in-person class. Late assignments, full credit for late assignments will only be given in the case of a documented illness or another valid documented reason. 10% will be deducted per day for lateness. After 1 week, assignments will not be accepted. So if you don't complete your module on time, still complete it, because you can still earn credit for it. The one exception to this rule is the last module, just because I cannot accept work after the last day of the semester. So after that Wednesday, that's it. So you're going to want to definitely make sure that that one is handed in on time. Again, if you receive special accommodations, please let me know as soon as possible. This is a very short class. We want to make sure that we have everybody's accommodations all set. Again, cheating and plagiarism, don't do it. Ignorance cannot be used as an excuse. So you want to see those plagiarism materials available in Canvas in Module 1. For more information, take that plagiarism quiz. Again, if you have questions, please email me. And so this is the schedule for a class. So you can see this is on the syllabus, but Module 1, when it opens, when it's due, the chapters and the topics that we're covering, the exercises that you have due. So you have exercises 1 through 3 due this week, a plagiarism quiz, and then quiz 1, which is on chapters 1 and 2. So every week, again, you're going to have 2 exercises, possibly 3, depending on the week, and then you're going to have a quiz that's due. Do not fall behind. If you fall behind in this class, it is very hard to catch up because it is so fast. So now I'm just going to talk a little bit about what is geography in the first place. This might be the first geography class that you've taken in college, and odds are if you grew up in an American public school, you got very little geography as it is. So geography is basically the study of the Earth and the way that we interact with it. And it is a lot more than that as well. There are 2 kind of major fields of geography. There's physical geography, which we're going to talk about in this class. There's cultural geography, and then there's a lot of mixing of those 2 together. Geographers use different concepts to kind of look at the world and talk about the world. And so I'm going to go through all of these and talk about kind of the main ones we'll look at in this class. But this is a blanket introduction that I give in all of my classes about how geographers look at the world. What are the things we use? What are the tools that we use? And so they are location, space, place, human environment interactions, movement, networks, systems, and scale. And I'll explain what each one of those is. So the first is location, right, which we will use a lot in this class. We will want to know where things are located. You're going to learn all about latitude and longitude and GPS and a bunch of other stuff at the beginning of this class. But we have absolute location, which is like a very specific, pinpoint, an address, a GPS location. And then there's also relative location, right? We are in Southern California, which is, the southern part of California. It's south of other parts of California. Then there is space. Geographers are very interested in how phenomena are distributed across space. So this is a map called the racial dot map. And every person is represented by a dot depending upon their race. You can actually Google this racial dot map and it'll come up and you can look at the entire US. They used census data from the US government to make this map. But as geographers, we would look here and say, like, this is Detroit. It is very segregated. And as geographers, we want to go, why is that segregation happening? Then there's place. Place is kind of all of the unique variables that go into making a place a place. This includes things like smells and sights and sounds. If you are walking down the street in Italy or walking down the street in LA, those are going to feel like two very different places. So things like the South, you are going to have very different ideas about what the South is depending upon if you grew up in the South, if you didn't grow up in the South, if you've ever visited the South, possibly based upon your race or ethnicity. Places like San Diego, sunshine and palm trees and Balboa Park and the Coronado Bridge. The city, right, as opposed to the country. Home is a place. Facebook is a virtual place. Lots of geographers do research on virtual places, right? We talk about Facebook like it is a virtual place. We put things on people's walls. Video games, a lot of people spend a lot of time creating, again, these virtual places in very fine detail. And then places like the ghetto, right? If I said to you the ghetto, you are going to have kind of very different connotations and ideas about what that means. Human-environment interactions is the concept that we infect the environment and the environment affects us in these kind of loops all the time. So we will definitely talk about human-environment interactions in this class. So for example, here is some industrial agriculture. Industrial agriculture uses a lot of pesticides. They also use a lot of synthetic fertilizers. And so as you spread those fertilizers around, when it rains, a lot of that fertilizer runs down into local waterways. And when you get fertilizer that runs down into local waterways, you get these algae blooms that happen. So that fertilizer basically fertilizes that algae. And when you get these big algae blooms, it chokes out other wildlife. So you can get fish that can die due to these algae blooms. And then maybe that where that was running off, maybe that was a spawning ground for some fish that then fishermen, they're affected downstream in the fact that now they have less fish. So we're going to be looking at these human-environment interactions, especially with concerns to climate change. Geographers also look at movement in networks. How do things and people move through the environment? Why do they move? And how does that shape the connections and separations between people and places? We'll be looking at this less in this class, but here is a picture from a few years ago when we had an influx of unaccompanied minors making the trek from Central America through Mexico, and this is a train through Mexico trying to reach the border of the United States. So in world regional geography, certainly we would talk about this and why this is occurring. What we are going to spend a lot of time looking at in this class is systems. So physical science, which this is, looks at systems, inputs, outputs, and interactions of matter and energy. This is a glacier system, which is one of the last things that we will cover in this class. But we will look at the atmosphere as a system. We will look at the hydrologic cycle, solar input in terms of climate change, all of these different systems. So lots of time looking at systems. And then finally, scale. So we want to know in geography what is the the right scale to look at something at, right? Is this a global issue or a local issue? Is it a state issue? Is it a federal issue? So when we talk about climate change, we'll talk about the fact that it is a global issue in that we have these cumulative effects that are affecting the entire planet, but it's often felt very locally. So now what you're going to do is your first exercise is basically a discussion board where you're going to introduce yourself to the class. And I'm going to want to know why you are taking the class. And I also want to know any countries that you have visited. If you haven't left the United States, that's totally fine. Many of students have not left the United States. Just tell me the most interesting place that you have been in the United States. And then also, why were you there? Were you on vacation? Were you living there? Were you in the military? Etc. And we'll use that as kind of a springboard for the class. But once again, welcome to Geography 1. Please email me if you have any questions.